Life in Reterra, a community rebuilding game. 10 and up, 2 to 4 players, about 35 minutes. There's your design team from Avalon Hill and Hasbro. Reclaimed by nature, rebuilt by you. Not long from now, the world as we know is an overgrown memory. Though the world has changed, we have changed with it, using anything we can find to build a new way of living. It's up to you to build a community of your own. Bring life to it with diverse terrain, reclaim buildings and relics of the past to make a home for your inhabitants. Interact with your neighbors and perhaps even interfere with their progress. Make your cozy community thrive to earn the most points and win. Build differently each time. There's a kind of the layout of the stuff. There again is Avalon Hill and Hasbro. Here are your contents. And now let's get this opened up and see. Alright, so there's the box cover. There's the inside of the box cover. We have us a rule book. Parents, again here for an instructional video. Welcome, the object. Here's those contents again. Here's more contents. The first time you play, how to set your trays up. Here's a setup of the game. Let's play. So on your turn, place a land tile, place a building or inhabitant. Use your building powers, refill, end of game. On your turn, don't forget, here's what you do. Here's the buildings. Things you find on land tiles. And then things you place on land tiles. P.S. Here are some tips. And then curated building sets based on how you might want to play the game. And then sets for when you get your own, or if you devise your own personal building set you enjoy, and the back of the rule book. All that will make sense later as I teach you how to play the game. Next up we have the player, or the main board. You'll notice it says 4 player, 3 player, 2 players, so that's how many you're going to be putting out. There's a turn reference and the different relics, and you play until you have a 4x4. And these show the gears that will be on the various cards. So this right here is all of the tiles. I'm going to lay those out for you here in a moment. And then you have these various trays. You can kind of make out the number. You have 2, 3, and 1. These are the different sets you can have. Then you have one more tray with the score pad. So in this one, you can see when we played, I won by a point. Down here you have these wood inhabitants. There are a couple different designs. I'm not sure if you can really tell that, but there is 2 different designs. And then you have your relic tokens and junk tokens. These are a bit thin, especially compared to these tiles. So each one of these trays is roughly set up the same. It's got a set of cards that corresponds to the building tiles that are inside of it. So we will start off with set number 1. So you'll have the cards. You'll see you'll have these tiles. These are all the same. These again are a little bit thin, similar to those other tiles. So they do have some thinness to them, but you have a whole stack of them, enough to fill what you need to on those boards. And then you have the cards. It shows point values. It shows how big they are, and then a special power. And these are all double-sided. So they have different powers and possibly score differently on each side. So that is set 1. So as you can see, these pictures relate to the pieces. So set 1 is done. Let's go to set 2. And pop these bad boys open. Really do like it. As you can see, it's got the embossing and stuff on it. So here's your tile pieces. So then you have a restaurant, a fishing hole, an inn, a workshop, a market. So that is set 2. We'll plop that right there. And now we have set 3. Pop that open. Those tiles. A junk catapult. A observatory. A sports field. hot springs, and an amphitheater. Alright, so let me get those tiles laid out for you, and then after that I'll show you how this plays. Alright, so here are all of those tiles. Let's zoom in here and get some closer looks at stuff. So things in white are relics. The gears are what you can put residents or buildings on. You have the different land types. This is a power source. That scores in a specific way, which I'll get into when I get into the teach. Then as you come down here, you'll see these ones say Life in Reterra, and then they have that on the back as opposed to this back. These are starting tiles. There's 4 of them, and you'll deal one out randomly to each player. So again, let's just kind of go through the rest of these tiles. You'll see they're between a couple different land types. Some have all land types and 2 relics. Some have all the land types and only 1 gear. So, but again, these are all of the land tiles. So let's get into how to play Life in Reterra. Alright, we are set up for a 2-player game of Life in Reterra. So, what makes it a 2-player game is you only fill up the spots that show a 2P, 2-player next to it. This is for 3 players, this is for 4 players. Each person gets one of these random starting tiles. It says Life in Reterra on both sides. They get 3 of the regular tiles. This is all they'll have throughout the game. You're going to set up a display of 5 tiles. You can have these stacked on the table if you want. I figure this is a pretty nice holder, and when we play, we're on either side, so we can just put that between the 2 of us and refill from there. You're going to find the designated cards that match those tiles, lay them out underneath them, choose a colored side. I have this set up for how they say to set up your first game. You're going to have the inhabitants and the junk/relic tiles in a supply nearby where everyone can grab. I'm going to put it here so it's easier for when I grab to show you how you play. And that is it for setup. You have the scoring pad, keep that nearby in case you need to reference it or so it's ready to go for end game scoring. So, right here is what you do on your turn. It also shows all the different relics. So on your turn you're going to place a land tile. You can either place one from your hand or one from the face up display. When you place it, you're going to place it on one of the orthogonally adjacent sides. You cannot go diagonal and you cannot offset it. So for this instance, I will grab this tile. So we'll turn it like so. Then, if that land tile has a gear, you may place 1 building or 1 inhabitant. Inhabitants, you just grab an inhabitant and put it on one of the gears. You cannot move inhabitants or buildings once they are placed, so place carefully. In order to place a building, you need to have the gears on the same land type. So for instance, if I had that, I could then build one of these buildings. So in order for it to build the building, everything has to have a gear, has to be on the same land type, and at least one of those gears needs to be on the tile you just placed. You cannot later place it. So if I didn't have an inhabitant there, I couldn't place this tile and put an inhabitant on that gear. It has to be on the tile you just placed. So I can place the garden right there. Going back, that was doing buildings. We'll just put that there. So we'll say I put the inhabitant on that spot. Then use building powers if you can. Some of these have building powers like the infirmary. Then if not, refill the land row if needed. So I will then fill the land row. After that, the next player will go and it'll come around. You're going to be playing until you get a 4x4 grid going. So again, if it comes to my turn, I look and you know what, this time I want to play one for my hand. So we are going to play a tile that was similar to that one there, and we're going to put out the building. So we put out that building. Then we don't have any powers to use. Refill the land row. Nothing's been taken. You don't refill your hand. Now you're down to 2. And again, the next player goes. Now for those powers. So say I had not placed that. Say instead I put an inhabitant on there. In the next turn, I grab this tile. I now have this 3 section. I can build this infirmary right on there. Starting on my next turn, I am able to use its power. So fast forward to next turn, we go. I can place a tile. We'll go ahead and we'll place this tile here. We'll put an inhabitant right here. And now we're into step 3. Use building powers if we can. So now you're going to look at the infirmary. At the end of every turn, place 1 inhabitant on this building or any other building on the same segment of continuous terrain. So right there. On a future turn, I'll put it there. They do not go on top of each other because you cannot put anything on top of an inhabitant or on top of a building unless a card states it. So you're going to play through until you get to 4x4 grid. You are then going to score points in a multitude of ways that are on your score pad. The first is you're going to look for terrain segments of 7+ spaces large. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that segment is going to give me 3 points. You're going to look through for all instances of that in your 4x4 grid, and 3 points for each one of those. Energy sources, which are these tiles. When you have them in your tableau, you need to have them surrounded on all sides by land, and if you do, they are worth 8 points. If they end up being on the edge of your grid, that does not count. It needs to have a land tile on all 4 sides. A energy source itself does also count for that. So if we have energy source there, that tile, and that tile, we actually have 2 energy sources that are scoring for 16 points. Each visible relic, and if you're able to put out any relic tokens on your board, each visible one of those is worth 1 point. Each inhabitant is worth 1 point. You are going to look at your buildings and see how much they score. Their base value is shown up top, and then any other specific scoring. For instance, this public square is worth 1 point per space of your largest segment. So had I had this on my board, right now would be my water more than likely, which is 4, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that building would be worth 11 points. Then you're going to look at any junk. Certain buildings put out junk. For instance, this farm, which is every time you place a building, place a junk token on a relic in one of your neighbor's communities. When it says neighbor, it's your players to your left or your right. So if I place this junk on top of that relic would not score 1 point, and the junk is worth -1 point at the end of the game. Total all that up, high score wins. And that is the basics of playing Life in Reterra. Again, there's 3 total sets, and each set comes with the 5 different building cards, which are double-sided. So in essence, you have 10 different buildings times 3, so you have 30 different buildings that have the powers and scoring. So, hope you enjoyed. Go ahead and like, subscribe, comment, share, and ring the bell down below. Let me know if you've tried this or if this game does interest you. And until next time, get rebuilding your community.